Hi, this is Jeff Curto, and welcome to episode number 31 of Camera Position, a podcast about the creative side of photography. Well, first of all, I'd like to welcome all of those of you who are new subscribers. I know there are a fairly large number of new folks out there, and I know you're there because I saw some uptick in some web traffic. And I appreciate you being here. I'm hoping that at least some of you have come aboard through the Photocast network, where a large variety of very high quality photo related podcasts are gathered, and I'm happy to be a part of that. The Candid Frame, Tips from the Top Floor, the Radiant Vista, a fair number of really good quality photo related podcasts. So go ahead and take a look at that, photocastnetwork.com. And if you're looking for some good photo related podcasts and you like what you're hearing here, you're probably going to like some of the things that you find on the rest of that group of podcasts. So go take a look at that. Also, thanks to those of you who have written in. I've had a fair number of notes and so forth. I especially like the one from, I had said at some point in the previous podcast that I like to know where people are and where you're listening. And somebody sent me an email from the subway train in Tokyo. So that's kind of a fun one. So thanks for sending those notes and letting me know what you're doing out there, and sending along website addresses so I can take a look at the kind of photography that you're doing. And that's certainly something that I'm always interested in. One of the best parts about my day job gig as a photo teacher at a college is that I get to look at a lot of photographs, and that's really a lot of fun. So today I'd like to talk more about this sort of post-production aspect of photography, and really what I want to talk about is editing photographs, and editing, getting rid of all of the stuff that you don't need. And I've got some reasons that I want to talk about this, and some reasons that it's a fresh and hot topic on my mind. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that I'm about to go off this coming weekend and attend a seminar at the Santa Fe Center for Photography. They have a series of conferences called the Creative Edge, and this one is the Long-Term Photographic Project from Concept to Audience. And part of what this event is about is being able to put some work in front of some people who might be able to help me get my work out to an even larger audience. And that would be a good thing. And I'd love to be able to do that, get some more people's eyeballs in front of my work. And of course, to make sure that I have exactly what I want, I've spent some time printing a portfolio of 20 images. 20 seems to be about right for a 20-minute portfolio review. It's a little bit too much, but not a little bit too little, so 20 images. So I'm printing those images, and then have a few extra images in case somebody is interested enough that they want to be able to look at some more work. But getting down from my long-term photographic project, one of the things I think is kind of neat is that this is a conference that seems kind of well suited to what I've been doing, this long-term photographic project that I've been working on in Italy since 1989. And the idea of editing down our work is a difficult thing. Obviously, in my 16 years of making photographs in Italy, I have made a lot of images. I have thousands of images and hundreds of images that I think are quite successful. And trying to edit down to 20 images was a fairly daunting task, trying to get myself down to a small number of pictures. Now, I did a first sort of run through in terms of looking at my catalog of pictures, and decided that what I would do was to concentrate on the primarily architectural images that are architectural or architectural and sculptural, where there are sculptural elements on buildings or as part of a decorative element on a building. So I'd made that decision right up front that was one of the things that I was going to do. So I went through my large body of photographs and began to look and cull down those kinds of pictures that were related primarily to the architectural. And that was what I wanted to focus on and what I wanted people to primarily look at. Now, the editing process of getting rid of the images that you don't need, back in the dark ages of photography, 3 or 4 years ago, before digital really got to where it is now, we would make prints. I would have big stacks of prints, and I would shuffle them around and decide which images, of these proof prints would be the ones that I would make final images of. But now we have some software that helps us do those kinds of things, and there are a number of them out there. I don't particularly want to plug any one of them. I use iView Media Pro, which I like quite a lot. But there's Portfolio, and there's Canto Cumulus, and there are even things like iPhoto, which comes on all the Macintosh computers, which can accomplish some of this same thing of sorting images and collecting them into smaller groups and subsets and being able to rate them and so forth and so on. So what I did is I went and made a pass through and got down to maybe 60 or 70 images, and then just kept kind of culling down until I found this set of images that you're looking at now. And this is kind of a tough one in terms of how I could present this to the podcast listeners out there. And what I decided to do was use Photoshop's function of creating a contact sheet and then saving that as a JPEG. So unfortunately, the pictures are going to be itty bitty. If you want to go to the cameraposition.com website, I'll have some larger images there, but I didn't want to make them too big so that they'd take forever to download. So I think they're about 900 pixels on the long dimension. You get an idea of what I went through in culling these things down. And if you can take a look at this first set of images, I had gotten down to 20 pictures, and I had been able to kind of narrow my choices down, but I saw a couple of sore thumbs, and it was really interesting. I don't know that I would have noticed this until I printed them out as contact sheets, or as I also printed some out as small, low quality 3.5 by 5 sized kinds of images, so I could sort them on a table and start working with them, not on the computer screen, because I still am tactile enough that I really like that, being able to move things around and being able to really look at them and look at relationships and begin to move them around. And we'll talk about sequencing probably on another episode of the podcast. But at this point, what I had noticed was that I had a couple of images that didn't really seem to be pulling their weight relative to this idea of looking at architectural and architectural sculptural kinds of things. Even though I really loved this image of the statue against the white sky taken on the Ponte San Angelo in Rome, the Angel Bridge. I love the image. I loved the morning when I made the image. I love the fact that the sun is directly behind the angel's head, and the sort of misty, soft quality of the image. I really like it, and it made me crazy to have to get rid of it. But in fact, in my second pass through, I decided to get rid of that image in favor of something that didn't have nearly as much depth to the picture. I didn't like that sense of depth, of distance in the picture. Looking at the rest of the images, it wasn't that the images were all that flat in terms of their three-dimensional space kind of relationship to their surroundings, but it was a situation that particular image had a great deal more sky than everything else, and it had a great deal less building than anything else, and really the only image that didn't have at least some element of a building in it. So I went on to this second pass of images and substituted a few things in that seemed to make sense to me. And again, it's kind of tough because I have favorite images. I have images that I'm especially fond of and particularly like, and really wanted to figure out how I could best get this group of images whittled down to a manageable set of pictures that I could easily show a professional portfolio reviewer, a gallerist, or a book publisher, or someone in a 20-minute block. And that's in fact what I knew I had to work with. So ultimately, I got down to this body of work, and this is the group of images that I'll be showing to people. And again, I have some other images that I have will have in the same portfolio box. But I've printed all of these on 16 by 20 paper, about 13 inches in the short dimension, and whatever the long dimension is, it turns out to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 17 or 18 inches thereabouts. So what I've wound up with is a body of work that, for me, hangs together quite well. It covers a lot of the concerns that I have in terms of the structural aspect of what I like to look at when I'm looking at these architectural subjects in Italy. The columns, the archways, the circular forms, the intricate carving, all of those things that I really have a particular affinity for. But I think that there are also some really nice relationships within these images. One of the things that I like as I look at the body of them together is the sort of repetition of column tops, and how the column top changes bit by bit by bit as you go through the body of work. I also very much like this sort of rosette idea, a circle with a kind of a rose shape in the middle of it that is in some ways echoed by the clock, the image that has the clock in it, and the incredible detail work that a lot of these objects hold. Really is so much of what drives me in the first place to make the photographs. So the idea of how these images work together was an important part of being able to see a body of things that kind of held together and would make a coherent presentation. And in fact, that coherent presentation in terms of presenting work professionally is an important part. I also thought it would be at least a little bit useful for some of you, and maybe there are probably a number of you out there for whom this will be old news and not very interesting, but I thought I would make a couple of quick snapshots here of some things that I'm also bringing along to this portfolio review. You always, of course, want to leave somebody with something, some sort of a visual reference that also probably has your contact information and other information about you on it. So this first snapshot kind of picture is a set of leave-behind cards that I've created. Again, simple inkjet prints, cheap paper, cheap but good paper. I really like that Epson enhanced matte paper for doing this kind of stuff. Really cheap, looks great. Wouldn't particularly last forever and ever, but boy, it makes sure makes a nice black and white print using the I'm using an Epson 4000 and the Harrington quad tone rip. I'll put a link for that Harrington quad tone rip in the website, the cameraposition.com website, for those of you who might not know about this incredibly wonderful way to be able to make high quality black and white imagery on your Epson printer. But the other part is that once I've got these leave behind cards, what I've also done is taken and put a selection of them, and you can see that I've made a number of leave behind cards in different subjects of imagery. And so I've taken and made a selection of those 5-6 images, put them into a translucent envelope so that the image shows through the envelope. And then also in the back side of the envelope, I've placed a copy of my business card and a copy of a CD, which has a large quantity of work on it, both in PDF format and also in a web browser format. And that, of course, is because I'd like to be able to make sure that anybody who looks at the CD later has a choice of how they'd like to view the images. They might want to look at it in a web browser, they might want to look at it as a PDF, and there is slightly different content on each one of those things. And then there's also a curriculum vitae and a bio so that somebody can learn a little bit more about me. So this is a nice little package. Didn't cost me very much, burning a CD, making a label for it, a business card, and 3 or 4 sheets of 2 or 3 sheets of inexpensive inkjet paper and a little bit of ink, and probably the envelope is one of the single most expensive pieces. But in terms of the idea of what this piece is intended to do, it's intended to not only remind somebody who I am and what my images look like, but it's also intended to remind them of images that they've already seen. So you can note that one of the images that's in the portfolio body of work that I'm going to show somebody is also one of the images on the leave behind card, is also the same image that's on my business card, is also one of the images that's on the cover of the CD or on the label on the CD. So the idea of being consistent really goes back to that whole editing process. And, I've always thought that photographers were more editors than they were creators. Our job as image makers is to find something in the world that interests us and then remove from the camera's viewfinder all of the bits and pieces of that thing that don't really count when it comes to making a photograph of it. So here we have the idea of editing, but editing from the other side of the coin. I've got a lot of photographs that I think are functional and interesting and work for me as objects that record a particular idea. And again, my idea, and some of you have been listening along for quite a long time, I have a notion of what this idea is. The idea has a lot to do, at least my idea of my photographs has a lot to do with the way in which these people over centuries have altered a landscape, altered the buildings. I find all of that stuff fascinating. The way people have created an environment for themselves in built structure, and that built structure can be buildings or landscape, the vineyard being a built structure as much as the city hall being a built structure. So the idea of making sure that I have refined my vision, refined my voice as much as I could to let somebody know what I really care about. And again, that goes back to what we talked about in the last episode of Camera Position, of finding out who you are. What are you interested in? When I started this project, I didn't know a whole lot about Italian architecture, and now I do. I know quite a lot about it and read a lot of books about it, and it's become a passion for me, subject of my photographs and sort of the subject of my study of a culture that I find interesting and a history that I find interesting. So the idea of making sure that you're connected to all of the things that you're creating is an important part of how you proceed through your life as a photographer. Thanks very much for listening. I wanted to remind people at the end of the podcast here that anybody who is in the Chicago metropolitan area, especially those of you who are in the far western suburbs, and golly, there might be 3 or 4 of you out there, I will be giving a gallery talk at Waubonsee Community College in Sugar Grove, Illinois, Tuesday, the 19th of September at 2 p.m., and it would be really kind of fun to see anybody who might be within the sound of my voice here out there and in the Arrowhead Room. And I'll put a link on the podcast homepage, cameraposition.com, for information about that. But if you happen to show up for that and you're a listener of Camera Position, listener to Camera Position, please come up and say hello and let me know who you are. So thanks very much for listening, and I hope you go out and make some photographs, and then I hope you spend a nice rainy day inside editing your take, figuring out what it is that you want to say with your photography. What is it that you have as your voice? And that voice can come through a lot more clearly if you edit down what you have to the barest essentials of what it is that tells your story in the most effective way. Well, thank you very much for listening, and I appreciate you being here, and I hope you join me again next time for the next episode of Camera Position, a podcast about the creative side of photography.
Photocastnetwork.com, your photography resource in the podosphere. Photocastnetwork.com